Joining me again is someone who doesn't doubt man-made warming at all, but he does fight the scaremongering. Bjorn Lomborg is president of the Copenhagen Consensus and best-selling author of books including Best Things First, his latest, go buy it, False Alarm, and of course the classic, The Skeptical Environmentalist. Bjorn, great to have you on the show again. First, the scaremongering. I mean, it just really ticks me off that people like that, you know, terrifying kids, how much danger are these school children really under from global warming? Are they going to die earlier, for instance?
No. So again, I think what we have also missed in communicating the whole message from climate change, as you point out, it's a real issue and it is a problem. But what you need to understand is the underlying growth of almost everything we know in human society leaves us better off. But what climate change does, it slows down slightly that immense progress that we're seeing. So even the UN is expecting by the end of the century, the average person will not live as he or she does now at about 73 years, but on average be somewhere between 88 and 100 years old on average. We're not going to be living shorter lifetimes. We're going to be living much longer lifetimes. And what climate change does is it slows down that progress. So instead of perhaps getting to 100, we'll only get to 97. And yes, that is a problem, but it's not the end of the world.
And of course, you know, we see really good signs that, you know, if you're worried about what the weather could do to us, for example, food production hitting a new record. I mean, this is not what was predicted under some of those models, is it?
Well, actually, most of the models will tell you that we're going to see ever more food being produced. But again, because of climate change, it'll be slightly less. Ever more. So we will be able to feed people better. We will see ever fewer people starving. We will see fewer kids dying from hunger, but we'll see slightly slower progress on this because of climate change. That's a very different message than what you hear in the media, which is this is the end of the world. And you just saw that that crying young girl. And of course, if you believe that, you actually think this is the only issue that we should be concerned about. But what you need to hear is, yes, there is a problem. No, it's not the end of the world. And that's important because it means you can start thinking smartly about this instead of just being panicked and say, we need to spend money on everything that could possibly help avoid this catastrophe.
Bjorn, explain then this catastrophizing. I mean, we've had claims that the Great Barrier Reef is dying from global warming. In fact, as you know, coral cover is near record highs. We've had our Prime Minister last week agree to take in 280 so-called climate refugees from Tuvalu because it's sinking, 280 a year. But in fact, as I think you've recently pointed out, the research says something very different about Tuvalu. It's growing. It's actually growing. So why these absurd scares?
Well, I think it's simply because we're asking people. So the whole climate story is asking people to spend somewhere between 5 and 15% of global GDP over this entire century on transforming the world from its current fossil fuel-based economy to a green economy. This is going to be fantastically costly. This is orders of magnitude more costly than any other thing that we've ever done. For instance, probably the most costly policy decision before that was the restitution from the Versailles Treaty forced on Germany, which was, of course, unaffordable. But we're talking about something that's much, much larger. We're talking about upwards of $2,000 trillion in cost over the century. You're not going to get people to do that unless you scare the pants off of them. So the reality here is it's a problem. And what we should do with the problem is figure out how do we smartly attack that? We should have some measures that actually reduce carbon emissions right now. We should also look at innovation, which is by far going to be the biggest issue. But of course, that doesn't sound like you're really taking this seriously enough. And so you paint up the end of the world and then you say, spend everything.
Well, that's what makes me wonder whether in some ways it's another one of these millenarian cults to sort of, you know, it's interesting. There's a little bit of a Christian eschatology here, you know, where sinful man going to wipe out, we're going to drown like Noah's flood because we have got our relationship with the earth gods or whatever are out of sync. But I also wonder, you mentioned the money. Is it also because there's so much money in it that so many people are pushing this along? I mean, you pointed out the other day that in the United States, non-government organizations in 2021 spent, and this is US dollars, between $8 and $9 billion annually on this issue. I mean, this is just incredible amount of money.
Yes, and the depressing part of the story was from New York Times that they no longer can afford the environmental organizations. They can no longer afford to care for wildlife because nobody's giving them money to that. Everyone is just giving them money for climate. Now, obviously, there's a lot of money in climate, and I think some people obviously get hitched on this because of the money. But I think the fundamental point is a lot of people feel just like the crying girl we saw earlier. Just feel this is the end of the world. I need to do something. And this is because we constantly tell people one side of the story. We tell them, here's a fire, here's a drought, here's a flood, without looking at the overall picture, which of course is that we're better able to handle all of those catastrophes and actually have less impact on humans, less impact on the economy, and be better off. We are going to live longer. We're going to be better educated. We're going to have higher incomes. We're going to be much better off. But because of global warming, we'll be slightly less, much better off. That's a very different story. And we need to get that story out because we need to stop scaring people and start getting to realize this is one of the many problems we need to fix in the 21st century. But it's not the only one. And it's not where we should be spending all the money.
Bjorn, thank you so much for that, mate. I really appreciate your good common sense, and as always, I admire your gardening prowess. I wish my plants looked as healthy as yours. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Love to catch up.